What's going on, Wolfpack? Welcome back to another episode of Market Watch Mondays. As always, I am your host at Mike Me Up with 2Ps on Twitter. That's right, Mike Me Up with 2Ps, not one, because someone stole that first one when I tried to make my Twitter account the first time around. But anyways, now it's stuck with me, so I'm rocking with it. But welcome back, guys. I'm recording this episode Sunday morning, so I'm not going to have any information on the Sunday games. I have a couple of points I might want to talk about on the Saturday games, but for the most part, I want to take a really early look with you guys in the 2022 rookie class, specifically the wide receivers, which is probably the most interesting to look at, and maybe do a little bit of explanation of kind of where my ranks come out, how I got there, et cetera, et cetera. But before we get on to that, man, y'all know what time it is. Hit that intro. All right. It's playoff time, man. It feels like the season just kind of flew by. Honestly, this is my favorite time of the year where I don't have to do much and just enjoy watching football. No more fantasy to keep track of, other than like some best ball and playoffs and betting and all that stuff. But for the most part, it's a lot less stressful. I'm just watching football, enjoying the show. Unfortunately, what I didn't enjoy was my Patriots getting eliminated in round one with a beatdown that Josh Allen and the Bills put on them. But you know what? I'm not that sad because the fact that we even made the playoffs this year was pretty nice. We're getting our first year quarterback in there. Obviously looked a little lost this week, but I'm hopeful, man. I'm hopeful that we lost Tom Brady, the GOAT, and 2 years later we're in the playoffs again. So to me, that's a good sign. We were spoiled as Patriots fans for the better part of like almost nearly 2 decades, so I can't really complain. But, I talked about this before, and I do really like to pay attention to games in the playoffs and what's happening, what players are breaking out, because to me, like the playoffs are during a time where the games mean everything. They mean a lot more than every single regular season game, right? So the way players are being used in the playoffs, to me, is a much better indication of how they're going to be used going forward versus, a lot of people wait like the fantasy championship playoffs a lot more than any other regular season game, where for me, I explained this last week, or not last week, but maybe a couple weeks before. It doesn't really make sense because from a player's perspective, it doesn't really matter. So you pop off in like week 17, unless you're one of those like fringe teams in the playoffs, right? Like for a lot of winning teams, that's just another game. It's just another regular season game. Whereas the playoffs is really where things matter. And for whatever reason, actually, I mean, we know what the reason is because it's hard to kind of account for the data because no one wants to use points per game. Everyone wants to quote like 17 game season stats. So it's hard to incorporate that into like your analysis. But for me, I like to look at like per game analysis, including playoffs for players that went into the playoffs. So I like to see how coaches are using players in the playoffs because that could be a better indication for the season to come. So that's why I pay attention during playoffs. So I'm not really, I'm not paying attention for fantasy scoring, but from the Bills and the Patriots, I think my main takeaway there is, first of all, Josh Allen's a god. I'm sorry I ever disrespected Josh Allen. I'm sorry I continue to disrespect him by not putting him in the tier 1 of quarterbacks. I made that mistake right again last month in the rankings. You guys probably saw that Josh Allen finally took that jump into the same grouping as Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, and Justin Herbert. I mean, there's some people probably going to make a case that Josh Allen could be the dynasty quarterback 1 overall, and I would not blame them. I mean, he's a rushing beast, and then he's also a high-scoring passing offense over there by the Bills. Like, they know what they do. Like, they know they have shitty running backs. They know they have Zach Moss and Devin Singletary back there. They're not trying to establish anything. They're just telling this guy to go out there and establish the fucking pass with the cannon of the arm that he has and the massive arm talent that he has. And he's been doing it for 2 years now. So I'm all in on Josh Allen. Sorry I'm late. Sorry I disrespected him, but it is what it is, man. But Josh Allen's a freaking baller. Dawson Knox, though. This one was interesting. Dawson Knox had a pretty good breakout this year for a tight end. He had good draft pedigree coming in as well. He's pretty athletic. But this year, he's really, really broken out, but mostly on the touchdown side. But again, in the playoffs, he goes for like, I think, 80-something yards, plus a couple tutties, led the team on receiving and touchdowns. But he's definitely one to keep an eye on. I'm not sure I'm ready to like vault him into that like elite tier or anything like that, but he's probably in that like Dallas Goedert type zone where you're looking at him, you're interesting. He's kind of in that like tier three-ish of tight ends, but he is on that right trajectory, right? He's improved year on year, and then now he's kind of like had a pretty big breakout this year. The stats won't show it when you look at fantasy apps, but he had a monster game this week. But I think the more interesting thing is on the Patriots backfield, all right? So Patriots backfield, Ramondre Stevenson versus Damian Harris. Damian Harris has been pretty good, I think, this season so far. So I'm not here to say that he stinks or anything like that. I'm also not here to say either of them are going to be bell cow. But for me, I think I'm going to be most likely betting on Ramondre Stevenson going forward, because between the two, they seem to be splitting carries for the most part, splitting work on the ground. But throughout the season, Ramondre has been the one that's been more favored when it comes to the receiving game. We kind of saw that again in the playoffs. He had 4 receptions. Harris had 1. So he's getting a lot more usage in the third down role, and he was a pretty decent pass catcher coming out of college. Harris was okay too, but it seems like he's kind of been pigeonholed in that 2-down grinder role. And as much as I love the Patriots, we're not a super high scoring offense, so I'm not personally investing in 2-down grinders on offenses that aren't really high scoring. So I think he didn't have a monster game or anything. He had maybe a couple breakout games this year, but other than that, he's been pretty decent. I tweeted a tweet out a little while ago looking at his missed tackles broken per attempt, and Ramondre Stevenson is up there, man. He has limited, obviously limited touches on the end of receptions and touches and all that, but on a per touch basis, I think he was top of the league missed tackles forced per reception. So that means he's really, really good in space, and he's huge. So we know he can potentially work himself in the bell cow role. We know he probably won't, because that's not what the Patriots do. So, but if I'm trying to invest in a running back, potentially someone that could provide you some running back 2 upside next year for pretty cheap, maybe around that second round pick range, I think he's a pretty good bet, because there isn't too much I want in terms of running backs in the second round of this year. So getting him for a second round cost in 2022 could be pretty beneficial. All right. So those are my main takeaways right now. Is just, again, I'm trying to track usage and player usage throughout the playoffs. But I think there's so little that you feel too confident in at running back heading into next year. There's a lot of old guys, a lot of question mark situations, a lot of injuries, et cetera, et cetera. So firing a cheap dart on someone like Ramondre Stevenson, when Damian Harris does go down to injury, if he goes down to injury, which he has been injured quite a few times this year, Ramondre Stevenson has stepped up and kind of taken that role. So, and I'm obviously expecting the Patriots to take a leap forward in terms of their offense next year. So this is something interesting to monitor. So keep tracking that. Josh Allen, still a god. And then on the Oakland side, the Bengals side, Jamar Chase, obviously a god. He went off for 100-plus yards, 9 receptions. So playoffs clearly does not faze him. Granted, gifted the Bengals their first playoff win in forever. I think over 3 decades, if I remember correctly, which is quite sad, actually. But good for them. Good for the franchise. Congrats to Joey B. Congrats to Jamar Chase. Congrats to T. Higgins. Probably already a top wide receiver. No, not probably. They already have a top wide receiver group in the NFL with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins as a young duo, and they're only going to get better. So Jamar Chase, real deal. No shockers there. Waller finally came back, immediately resumed his role as top of the receiving corps in that Raiders offense. Hunter Renfrow is still, he was still usable. He had a few receptions, but he's kind of back to that low ADOT usage slot role. So Darren Waller, I'm not concerned about him going forward. He had a very, very disappointing year. I was heavily exposed on Darren Waller, so he definitely killed me a bit there. But I think next year I'm going to be just as comfortable swinging on Darren Waller again, because I do think that offense runs through them. I think the interesting takeaway, though, is Josh Jacobs has been able to retain his receiving role. So John Gruden, ever since Gruden left, it's been really, really positive for Josh Jacobs. And his ADP isn't really moving because he hasn't been scoring a ton of touchdowns. But if you look at his usage and his receiving usage specifically, I thought, maybe it was just Darren Waller leaving, and possibly that could still be it because there's still a lot of small sample bias going on, given we just kind of got Darren Waller back into the fold. But he's been hitting 3-4 receptions a game quite a bit. So the TDs haven't been there. But my only complaint about Josh Jacobs was that he was pigeonholed into a 2-down grinder role. And when he had big games with a lot of touchdowns, obviously it paid off, but the Raiders offense isn't that good. So those are few and far between. So the fact that he's getting usage in the receiving game is really, really promising. So I think Josh Jacobs is someone to look out for if you're looking for – it's definitely a risky bet because, like you said, he's one of those older running backs, but he's still young enough to provide decent production down the line. So for me, that's another interesting takeaway. Josh Jacobs is someone I was pretty low on because of Kenyon Drake. Obviously, Drake being injured helped too. When Drake was in, Drake was taking a lot of the receiving work. So that's something to monitor. But if Josh Jacobs can somehow finally find himself a receiving role in this offense, which is what he was touted for coming out of college, it could be pretty interesting for that Raiders offense. But, okay, so let's take a look at the 2022 rookie class, all right? So, in terms of my early rankings, I'll just flash them real quick on the screen. So, you'll see that I have the wide receivers at the very top, and this is a function of timing. I just don't know where these quarterbacks and running backs will be drafted, to be honest with you. Like, none of them are really locks. Like, there's no Jonathan Taylors here. There's no DeAndre Swifts here where I know for an absolute fact they're going to go in the second round, right? And there's no Trevor Lawrence. There's no Zach Wilson. There's no Justin Fields. There's no Trey Lance. There's no, like, auto locks for, like, top 5 quarterback draft capital. So, especially with Matt Corral injured. So, my rankings right now is a reflection of that, right? Like, if I'm drafting right now, I'm drafting for some security. I want to draft guys that I know are going to have high draft capital invested in them. So I want to move forward with that. And this is the lesson that I learned over the years where, I used to rank like analytics darlings like really high, like Tyler Johnson and Seth Williams, right? Two of my biggest whiffs. Actually, I wasn't that high on Tyler Johnson, but Seth Williams, definitely one of my biggest whiffs where I thought, he was really high. And luckily I learned to adjust that, he wasn't getting enough draft hype, so I moved him down. So I'm taking that same type of approach here where the guys that are getting draft hype, I'm going to rank highly for now because draft capital is security, and if anything, I can flip them later when their value goes up. But I just don't have certainty over quarterbacks and running backs, and this is why people say this is one of the weaker classes, because the strength of a class is anchored around the strength of the quarterback and the running back class for when you're playing Superflex, obviously, which is all that I play now. But I think it's interesting here. What's interesting here to note is I obviously have the top 3 guys. I have Treylon Burks, for those of you guys on podcast. Treylon Burks, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Breece Hall, Sam Howell, Isaiah Spiller, Matt Corral, David Bell, Kenneth Walker, Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis, and Carson Strong. Now, if I had more confidence in Sam Howell's draft capital, I think he would really shoot up. I think he's a very interesting profile. He's got the Konami code. He was an early producer, and he had a little bit of a down year, but he was a monster early on in his career. So, I don't want to make that same mistake I made with Justin Herbert where I killed him for the last year, even though he showed enough the year before. But if his draft right now, I think like he's projected to go in like the later first round, mid to late first round, which isn't that exciting. That's why I have him a little bit lower. But if he gets confirmed draft capital, you can expect these ranks to shift a lot more, where I get the quarterbacks and running backs pushed up if they do get the necessary draft capital. Like if Breece Hall goes in the second round, which is where I hope he goes, but I'm not sure. If he goes in the second round, he'll probably hop into the top 3 because I really, really like Breece Hall as a player. And then Isaiah Spiller as well, who I've been on for a long time. I love his athleticism and his explosiveness. Kenneth Walker, I think I'll just be maybe a little bit lower than everyone else. He's more of like a first and second down guy. He's really great, really explosive from that perspective. But I'm not sure where he will land draft capital wise. And Kenny Pickett, I have him up here because draft capital wise, he's projected to go pretty high. And then Malik Willis, same thing. He's one of those like guys where it's like super high upside, but not sure where he'll land draft capital wise. So this first round, like these players will probably remain constant. And then just out the edge of here is Jameson Williams as well. So he's obviously projected to go very high in terms of draft capital. This will probably be the bucket of players, but you'll probably see some shifts here depending on how those players shape out in terms of the draft and draft capital. All right. So this is my ranks. If you want the full ranks, obviously go to the Patreon, patreon.com/wolfpack. That's patreon.com/ourpack. That's patreon.com/ourpack. You'll get the monthly rankings out there for Devy and for rookie. I'm going to be updating for the February ranks. I'm going to be updating the rookie draft class of 2022, so you'll be able to see this full rookie view, and that's why I have it right now. So if you want interested in that, if you want to get degenning and start doing your drafts early before the NFL draft and want to use my ranks to do that, make sure you go to patreon.com/ourpack. All right, I think the most interesting group I like to talk about now at this time in the season though is wide receiver, because wide receiver we have a lot of data. We have all their production, and wide receiver is the most easy to predict using analytics in terms of future success. Obviously draft capital is a big piece, film is a big piece, so I like to piece that together with all the film people that I really, really respect in the industry. But they're obviously filtering through the film, but it takes a lot less time to filter through the numbers. So that's why I like to really look at wide receivers now. And in a class like this where there's a lot of question marks around running backs and quarterbacks, one we don't have question marks around is wide receiver. Right now, I don't want to get ahead of myself because I don't want people to get ahead of themselves. This is a great wide receiver class, right? It's a fantastic wide receiver class, but it is still, there is no Jamar Chase in this class, right? There's no generational wide receiver. I love Treylon Burks. I love Garrett Wilson. I love Drake London, but none of them are Jamar Chase. So if you start seeing generational tags being tossed around in this class, just fade, because you don't want to get way bought into the hype. But there are a lot of really, really good players in this class, okay? So these are some of the top guys that are being talked about. I put Jameson Williams up here because, from the film guy side, he's a heavy favorite. I talked to people I respect over there. Dynasty Nerd, my homie Jared Wackerly, he loves Jameson Williams. And Dynasty Nerds, if you guys don't know, they put out nerd film grades last year, which actually beat out Draft Capital, which is very, very, very impressive. So I listen to what they say. I listen to what guys like Ray GQ say. I listen to, Angelo Fantasy. I listen to Jetpack Galileo. These are all probably some of my favorite film guys to pay attention to. So I like to marry the analytics with the film. So now it's really, really easy to look at analytics. So this is a screenshot from Campus of Canton. Shout out to all the Campus of Canton homies out there. I'm not affiliated with them at all, but I subscribe to them because they put out really, really cool data like this for college players. So shout out to all of them. Jared Wackerly, Jared Bacchus is like the, I guess the numbers guy. So shout out to them. Shout out to Campus Can. They're building some really cool stuff over there for the college game. And, I live in the spreadsheets, but it's really cool to have these types of data visualizations. So I slapped the top 5 wide receivers on here to look at their receiving yards, market share against expected and average. And the really cool thing I like about Campus of Canton is they do it by year out of high school versus age, right? So there's been some really smart people to do studies out there to show that breakout age is not necessarily the best way to do it, right? Because that misses out on guys like Calvin Ridley, who just basically go into college at a later time. So we care about how many years they are out of high school in terms of tracking, and it could be like they could just be like older players, right? So. But years out of high school, or years of experience, another way to put it, actually yields much better results than just simply age. So I actually made that switch. I looked at years out of high school and experience versus breakout age, and then I look at that in terms of plotting it against market share of receiving yards, and plotting that against the expectation to see who's outperforming. So this is a adjustment I made, I think, either last year or the year before. So it kind of removes age out of the equation and replaces it with experience. All right. So in this, I have Treylon Burks, Wan'Dale Robinson, Drake London, Garrett Wilson, and Jameson Williams. And just so you guys remember, I have it ranked right now: Treylon Burks, Garrett Wilson, and Drake London. Although I used to have them all three in the same tier, but I think Treylon Burks is really just in a tier of his own because his production this year and years before has been absolutely insane. You see that as a freshman, he's an older prospect, but as a freshman, he was already above the line, and then year 2 and year 3, he just blew the expectations out of the water from a market share of receiving yards perspective. Garrett Wilson, who used to be my wide receiver one after last year, after the great sophomore year he had, he's moved down a little bit just because, Jackson, I'm not going to try and pronounce his full name, but Jackson Smith at Ohio State has been an absolute monster and potential wide receiver one of the 2023 class. So Garrett Wilson took a bit of a step back, but he's kind of already proven in the sophomore year that he's got the goods. And he is projected to go pretty high from a draft capital perspective. So I'm not going to move him too far down my ranks, but I do think the reason why Treylon Burks should be elevated into his own tiers because his production has been outstanding, and he's an absolute freak. He's a freak in terms of athleticism, right? This guy is like DK Metcalf size and just insane speed. I'm curious to see how he tests at the combine, but I expect him to be a very, very upper echelon athlete. That's not why I have him ranked highly, but that in combination with his production, in combination with his projected draft capital, which I think he's going to go in the first round, even if he goes in the early second, I think he'll probably stay where he's at. But yeah, Treylon Burks, absolute freaking monster. Drake London, who a lot of people really, really like as well. You can see here, this is a little bit skewed, right? Because Drake London obviously got injured. If he wasn't injured, I think his third year would be up there where Treylon Burks and Wan'Dale Robinson is. And his second year was still above the line as well. And he's another, I think he's a very like Mike Evans-esque type of like jump ball, big receiver, but also has skills with the ball in his hands. So I think this is a very, very exciting class formed by those trio at the top. And again, I used to have them all in the same tier, but I think Treylon Burks has separated himself a little bit. I think the more interesting players is Wan'Dale Robinson and Jameson Williams, right? So this is an interesting one. Wan'Dale Robinson is incredible. He's a great player, do it all. Swiss Army knife, obviously highly, highly productive throughout his entire career as a freshman. as a second year and as a third year. So the battle between them will be draft capital for me, and also intaking what the film community has to say, obviously, because I think Jameson Williams is projected to go really, really high in the draft. So that obviously matters. But it's hard for me to like just fully comprehend what happened with him at Ohio State. He just never, I mean, he had an opportunity to play. He just never did anything. And then all of a sudden he comes to Alabama and he's an absolute freaking monster. But again, people say Alabama is like wide receiver U, but a lot of those good players already left, right? So Jalen Waddle already gone, Devonta Smith already gone. Obviously, he wasn't even there for Calvin Ridley and them. So he, in a year where there wasn't really anyone else in Alabama, he stepped up and became the guy. But that's a lot less impressive to me. So I think it's gonna be hard for me to jump on the Jameson Williams train because all the narratives that got pushed for Henry Ruggs even and Jalen Waddle and Devonta Smith, like they aren't there for him, right? Because he wasn't there before. He just transferred in this year, and then when he finally came in, he blew up as a top option for Alabama. But Alabama just basically stomps everyone. I mean, they have a great O-line, they have a great run game, they have great defense, they have great everything. So it's really hard for me. But like I said, my trusted friend, Jared Wackley, tells me he is that guy. He is going to be a monster. So I'm curious to see what my other film guys tell me. If all the other film guys come to me and tell me this guy's that dude, I'm still not going to have him like in my top 5 or in my top 3, but I'm more willing to move him up a little bit to just try and contextualize like what he was. Like maybe it's possible he just wasn't that guy early on. But again, if you're playing the analyst game, you're playing the numbers game, you're not going to feel very good putting a lot of draft capital into the Jameson Williams bucket. All right, and I have another graphic here that I want to show you guys, which I also look at, is yards per team pass attempt. So yards per team pass attempt is a really cool metric. It kind of combines like market share with efficiency. Basically, how you calculate it is you take their total yards divided by the total number of team pass attempts. So if they have a lot of yards, obviously they have a lot of market share as well. But when you divide it by the team pass attempts, it shows you how efficient they are. And again, Treylon Burks, a monster and an absolute standout. And Garrett Wilson was an absolute monster in this metric last year, which is why I moved him up so highly. Obviously, he took a big step back this year, but he kind of already showed what he was last season. And then, again, Wan'Dale Robinson constantly outperforming here as well above the line. And then you have Jameson Williams. So I think the positive for Jameson Williams is this. Even though he didn't break out till his third year, he broke out at and above, like he still outperformed expectations based on the trend line for a third-year player. So if you want to hang on to something analytically for Jameson Williams, that is it, right? And then so if you want to really get there with Jameson Williams, you put him on your top 3, your top 4, top 5. Like you got to get there through film. It's not going to be a numbers game, and it's very hard to kind of contextualize his Houdini act for the first 2 years of his career. And one hit wonders that break out their last year of college typically are very, very poor bets. So just keep that in mind as you're going forward. And then now you have obviously he had the season-ending injury as well. So just question marks on top of the question marks there. I expect I probably will not have too much of Jameson Williams this season unless he falls into the second round, later in the second round. But yeah, for now, it's just going to be a pretty tough road. But Treylon Burks, just again, clear breakout. 2 years. If you look at the gap in year 2 and year 3 between Treylon Burks and the rest of the field, which is the trend line, he is outperforming expectations. He's smashing expectations. So analytically, there is not much to dislike about Treylon Burks. All right, true freshman breakout. Smashes in year 2, both from a market share and efficiency perspective. Smashes again in year 3 and continues the upward trajectory. I think it's really important. That's why I had to dip back on Garrett Wilson a little bit. He took a step back in year 3. But for wide receivers, you want to keep seeing them improve. You want to see wide receivers continually improve when they stay in school. Obviously, you don't want to see them stay in school for a 4th year, but for those that do, you still want to see them outperform. You don't want to see any steps back in terms of market share and efficiency metrics. And then the last graphic I want to show you guys on this wide receiver class is yards per team pass attempt over average. So this kind of puts into context what to expect from that player in that conference. What are other wide receivers doing, right, in terms of yards per team pass attempt? Because if you go to a small school, small program wide receiver and you're just smashing yards per team pass attempt expectations, that's a lot less impressive than someone doing it in the Big Ten or the SEC. Big Ten like Garrett Wilson, who's smashing it well above expectations, right? And you can see here again, Treylon Burks continues to lap the field. Dot on the line freshman season, dot well above the line sophomore year, well above the line in third year. So he just continues to smash. And again, this is another good sample, good data point for Jameson Williams. One of the few is he also is above expectations. He's third in the class. Will probably be fourth if you actually account for Drake London's injury, but fourth in the class when accounting for yards per team pass attempt over average. But anyways, I show all those charts to tell you this. Treylon Burks is the clear wide receiver one. He's a clear, for me right now, the 1.01 of your rookie drafts if you're drafting today. Now, obviously, if you draft later on and Sam Howell goes in the top 5 of the draft, then you can make a case to bring that quarterback up. But for now, or Breece Hall goes in the first round, for example, then you can kind of start having some conversations. But for me, if I have the 1.01 in this class, I'm probably drafting Treylon Burks. But more likely than not, I'm going to try and trade back, maybe get a Drake London plus, get a Garrett Wilson plus, get a Breece Hall plus, and Sam Howell plus, for example, if he does actually get the draft capital. But it's a very, very interesting class. I think it's formed by the big three, right? The Treylon Burks, Garrett Wilson, the Drake London, and then you have like the Wan'Dale Robinson and Jameson Williams right after that. So those 5 wide receivers kind of headline the class. The top 3 really headline the class. But it's a lot of question marks at running back, a lot of question marks at quarterback, which is why I have my rankings the way they are. All right. So that's my early look. If you have rookie picks right now in 2022, obviously don't trade them, right? We don't have enough information yet from the draft capital perspective, from the combine perspective. All that stuff is going to increase the value of your players. And now, after the NFL is done, especially once the playoffs are done, once the Super Bowl is done, all shift focuses to the rookie class. All eyeballs focus, all content, all news outlets, anything football related is going to be on the rookie class. So that's when all the media coverage is. That's when all the eyeballs come. That's when all the FOMO starts, and that's when the rookie hype starts building and building and building, leading up to the rookie draft itself. So make sure you hang on to those rookie picks for now, just because it's a weaker quarterback, a weaker running back class. That doesn't matter. Nothing overcomes the what do you call it? I guess the weaknesses of human psychology. And human psychology and FOMO will push the prices up and will lead people in your leagues to feel like they're missing out, and they're gonna want to jump in. So hold on to those bags, and hopefully you can trade back. Hopefully you can trade out into a 2023 class plus or a 2023 first, something like that. But if you can't, know comfortably that there's a lot of really, really good wide receiver talent. And the way I have my ranks probably isn't the way a lot of normal people will draft their ranks, right? People will probably push running backs up. They always do. If you think back to the 2019 class, even though there were more wide receiver prospects there, things like guys like Devin Singletary got pushed in the first round. David Montgomery went in the top 3, right? So even though the running back, especially when the running back class is weaker, like they really get pushed up because like it's a scarce position. So that's why I say if you have the 1.01, you might not have to use it on Treylon Burks there. Just trade back and maybe land a Treylon Burks, Garrett Wilson, and Drake London a little bit later, right? And I think that's a move I'm probably going to be making throughout the offseason as I get into my drafts. I always try and trade back, but I feel like this is a great year to trade back just because the tier gaps aren't that big between the players, and especially cross-positional wise. If you think back to last year, like the quarterback tiers were like, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, and Trevor Lawrence, and then there was a huge gap, right? And then some people had like Zach Wilson in there, but after that, it was a huge gap. A lot of high pedigree, high draft capital players. I just don't know if we have that this year. So a lot of unknowns. That's why I have my rankings the way they are. It's a built into like a risk tolerance type thing. Right now, I'm trying to build my ranks so that it's not really, really fragile to draft capital over underperforming, right? And that's what it means. So because I think those wide receivers that I named are really, really locked in for very, very good draft capital. They have very good production. They have very good analytics profile. And from what I know, the most people I speak to on the film side also really love them. So there's not much question marks there for me to address, right? Whereas in the quarterback class, everyone has different opinions. I mean, you look at like draft projections, I have no idea what's going on. Like there's just too many question marks for me. So if you're drafting right now, draft for security. You don't want to be the guy that reaches for like an analytics darling or a favorite film guy. Like think about the guy that drafted Riley Ridley in the first round. A lot of film guys love Riley Ridley, right? But there wasn't much draft hype about him other than the fact that he's related to Calvin Ridley, and a lot of people got burned on him. And then similarly, like I said, on the analytics side, if you drafted early, you probably drafted Seth Williams early, right? And again, he's someone that didn't have enough draft capital, didn't have enough draft hype, and if you burn a first round pick, second round pick on him, you were kicking yourself, right? So you're better off securing protecting your assets of your rookie picks if you draft this early than trying to swing on guys you really, really love, because you can always hedge that out and manage that portfolio with later drafts. If there's guys that you really like, once draft capital is secured and it proves it out, you can draft them later. But draft for now, draft for security. That's what I do. Okay, I draft for security because there's too many unknowns in this rookie running back class. So if you're drafting early and you can't trade back, just grab one of those top wide receivers. I think you'll be pretty happy. I mean, maybe they turn out to be, like that next Jalen Waddle, the next whatever. Or probably not the next Jalen Waddle because he broke rookie receiving records, but like that next really, really good wide receiver in the class, right? All right. That's all I got for you guys this week from a content perspective. I have some other news. So big news, we're moving the content actually back to the main Big Dogs channel, just because, now this channel is basically like me by myself making videos. Obviously, we're going to try and add some more members to the team to create more Dynasty content. But I think just exposure-wise, I think initially when Nick wanted us to move to this channel, because like the main channel was just like too cluttered and there's too many things going on. But I think now like the benefits of having more eyeballs on the Dynasty content and everything else is going to outweigh the downsides of actually having a cluttered channel, so to speak. So the Godfather himself texted me, wanted me to let you guys all know that we've always been under the Big Dogs umbrella anyways. I've just been doing this channel and doing shit as I see it with Noah, but I think we're going to be moving back just to get more eyeballs, which is good for me because that means more people get to watch Market Watch Mondays, more people get to shit on me, and it's always a good time, right? So we're going to be moving this channel back over there. I don't know when exactly it's going to happen. I'll keep you guys updated as Nick kind of updates me when we want to do that merge. But it was great. It was great while it lasted, man. We built ourselves to a nice little 5 to 6K subscriber base. Very, very loyal audience. Thank you guys, obviously, for following me this whole time. I can't believe I've been making videos all this time. I don't even know how many videos I made. Like, all those people that do like the anniversary videos, like 100 episodes, 50 episodes, a year, 2 years, whatever. I just haven't been tracking close enough because I'd have to go back to find out when I did the first Market Watch Monday on the Big Dog channel, when we shifted off, I guess, added together. I guess it's not that much work, but I'm just lazy. I'm lazy and I don't really track those types of milestones. I just kind of come on here and pump out content and say what I want to say, have fun, and hopefully teach you guys a thing or two about fantasy football to hopefully make you guys a better player. That's my goal. That's always been my goal. That will always be my goal, and hopefully I'll continue to be able to continue to do that. Except I guess to a back to the bigger and wider BDG audience, and hopefully, man, I think my hope here is like you move back to the main channel, get more people in Dynasty. Like the main channel has obviously been mostly like redraft focused, and now that we're in the off season, especially, it's a great time to kind of go back because now we can kind of merge a lot more Dynasty content. So yeah, I'm excited. Big things ahead. Big things for everyone. I think last thing, obviously, again, just hop on over to the Patreon, patreon.com/ourpack, patreon.com/ourpack for all my ranks. We'll probably have to figure out, what we want to do there from a BDG perspective, but I'll keep you guys updated, man. I always keep it 100 with you guys. We don't really have much over here, as you can see, like from like my bed head to, a bad hair days, whatever. Nothing gets hidden. But anyways, appreciate all of you for following along. Appreciate all of you for supporting me in this journey so far. Exciting times. We're heading on to the off season. It's going to be a fun time, all right? Until next time. Peace.